A single mother fiercely protects her daughter from thugs on a dark street, unaware she is being watched by a reclusive black billionaire who will change her life forever. "Give me the purse, lady," and nobody gets hurt. The biting cold of the November wind whipped down the narrow alley, a relentless predator hunting for any exposed skin. It carried the stench of damp refuse and urban decay, a smell so familiar to Elena that she barely registered it anymore. But tonight it felt more menacing, clinging to the heavy fog that swallowed the weak, flickering light from the single street lamp overhead. She clutched her daughter's small hand tighter, the worn fabric of Lily's thin coat feeling fragile and inadequate against the encroaching chill, a flimsy shield against a hostile world. The silence of the deserted street, usually a quiet companion on their walk home from the late bus, was now a cavernous void, amplifying the gravelly voice that had splintered the night. He was a shadow detaching itself from a deeper shadow, flanked by two others, their forms bulky and indistinct, their intentions a palpable threat that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. Elena's heart, a weary drum that had beaten a steady rhythm of quiet desperation for years, suddenly hammered against her ribs, a frantic prisoner against bone. She froze. Her first instinct, primal and overwhelming, was to shield her child. She pulled Lily behind her, the little girl's sharp gasp, a tiny terrified sound in the suffocating quiet. Elena's own breath hitched, a knot of ice forming in her chest. The purse they demanded contained $17 and a half-eaten granola bar. It was everything she had until her next paycheck, a pitiful sum that represented the chasm between feeding her daughter tomorrow and not. Yet, in that seismic, terrifying moment, the money vanished from her thoughts, replaced by the image of Lily's wide, innocent eyes, now glistening with fear. Her worn, threadbare purse was nothing. Her daughter was everything. She kept her gaze steady, looking at the man who had spoken, her posture one of unflinching, maternal defiance. She was a lioness, with nothing left to lose but the one thing she would die for. Total silence. From the darkened, recessed doorway of a closed bookshop across the street, a man watched, himself a ghost in the gloom. Julian Vance was a king in a self-imposed exile, a billionaire who had built an empire of gleaming glass and steel, but now found his home in the shadows, haunted by a sterile silence that no amount of wealth could fill. The rain had started, a soft, sorrowful drizzle that matched the perpetual grayness in his soul, and he had been walking aimlessly, letting the city's melancholy seep into him, a familiar and almost comforting pain. His suit, though simple and dark, was impeccably tailored, a detail lost in the oppressive darkness, rendering him as anonymous as any other weary soul trudging through the night. He was a man hollowed out by grief, the memory of a different little girl's laughter, a constant aching echo in the cavernous chambers of his heart. Then he heard the voice, sharp and cruel, and saw the tableau unfold, the predators and their prey. A timeless, ugly story. He saw the mother's swift, protective movement, the way her fragile frame became an iron wall before her child. He saw the terror in her eyes, but beneath it, something else, something he had not seen in a very long time. It was a pure, selfless, unwavering love that asked for nothing and was prepared to give everything. A sob caught in his throat. The main thug took a step forward, his laugh a low, ugly rumble. "What, you think you're tough?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. Elena's body was a taut wire of fear, trembling, but not breaking, her hand still locked with Lily's behind her back. She could feel her daughter's small fingers digging into her palm, a desperate anchor in a terrifying storm. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of her entire world. "Just leave us alone. Take the purse." She started to unclench her fingers from the worn strap. a gesture of surrender. But the man wasn't looking at the purse. He was looking at Lily, a flicker of something truly vile in his gaze. He took another step. That was when something inside Elena splintered. The quiet, dignified desperation that had been her constant companion for years ignited into a cold, protective fury. "No," she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong, echoing with a power she didn't know she possessed. "You will not come near her." She stood her ground. Julian watched, his own heart pounding, a strange, forgotten sensation. He saw the shift in her, the transformation from victim to guardian, and it was like watching a star being born in the suffocating darkness of his own life. This woman, with nothing to her name but a threadbare coat and a fierce love, was showing more courage than any of the corporate titans he battled daily in ornate boardrooms. Her love was not a transaction, it was a sacrament, it was pure. In that moment, watching her stand against the impossible, a tiny, forgotten seed of purpose began to stir within his hollow chest. He didn't know it yet, but the sight of this desperate mother and her child had just thrown him a lifeline, pulling him from the deep, cold waters of his grief. A siren wailed in the far distance, a lonely, mournful sound that grew steadily closer. The thugs exchanged nervous glances, their bravado faltering. The leader shot Elena a look of pure venom. "This ain't over," he hissed, before snatching the purse from her loosened grip. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the three men vanished back into the shadows, swallowed by the night. He was gone. Elena's strength vanished with them, her legs turning to water. She sank to her knees on the cold, damp pavement, pulling a sobbing Lily into her arms, burying her face in the child's hair. The rain began to fall harder now, a relentless hammering mingling with her silent tears. She rocked her daughter gently, whispering soft assurances she did not feel herself. The $17 were gone. The last of her food was gone. A profound, bone-deep weariness settled over her, heavier than the fog. She was so tired of being strong. She was so tired of being alone. Across the street, Julian Vance remained in the shadows, a silent sentinel. He had been about to step out to intervene, but the siren had done his work for him. Now he simply watched her, this stranger, this virtuous sufferer, and felt a profound, undeniable connection, a sacred duty forming in his heart. He memorized her face, the lines of exhaustion and fierce love etched there, and made a quiet, solemn vow. He would find her. He would not let her world be this cold and this cruel for one more day. He would become her hidden savior. He had to. The days that followed were a blur of deepening hardship for Elena. The loss of that $17 was not a minor inconvenience. It was a catastrophe that cascaded through their fragile lives. It meant walking the 2 miles to her cleaning job at the sterile, impersonal office building because she couldn't afford the bus fare. It meant watering down the soup until it was little more than warm, salty water, a ghost of a meal. She would watch Lily eat, her own stomach clenching, with a familiar dull ache, and she would smile, a brittle performance of maternal reassurance. The hollow look in her own eyes when she caught her reflection in the smudged bathroom mirror was that of a woman running on the last of her reserves. The world had become a series of muted colors and muffled sounds, her reality shrinking to the singular, desperate focus of keeping her daughter safe and fed. The biting cold of their small apartment seemed to seep into her bones, a permanent chill that no amount of blankets could warm. The single radiator in the corner clanked and hissed, a dying beast offering little comfort against the relentless November frost that painted intricate, cruel patterns on the window pane. She worked with a quiet, dignified efficiency, scrubbing floors and polishing desks in the dead of night, moving through the cavernous, empty office spaces like a phantom. The silence of the building was a heavy blanket, broken only by the soft click of her mop bucket or the hum of the ventilation system. She would often pause and look out the gleaming, floor-to-ceiling windows At the city lights twinkling below, a breathtaking tapestry of a life she could see but never touch. It felt like another world, a universe of warmth and light and security, impossibly distant from her own. She never complained. She never faltered in her work. Her supervisor, a man with impatient eyes and a perpetually sour expression, saw only a quiet, replaceable cog in his machine. He did not see the immense inner strength, the unwavering spirit of a mother who scrubbed toilets with the same meticulous care she used to braid her daughter's hair. She was invisible. Then the strange things began to happen. It started on a Tuesday, a day so bleak and gray that the sky seemed to press down on the city. Eleanor returned home, her body aching, her mind preoccupied with the final eviction notice that had been taped to her door that morning, its crisp, official paper a death sentence for their tiny sanctuary. Her heart was a leaden weight in her chest. She opened the door, bracing for the familiar cold, but was met with a soft hush. Tucked under her door was a plain white envelope. There was no name, no return address. Her fingers, trembling slightly, tore it open. Inside was a stack of crisp, clean $100 bills. 10 of them, $1,000. She gasped, a sharp, incredulous sound that echoed in the small room. She looked around, her heart pounding, half expecting someone to jump out and claim it was a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was only the sterile silence of her empty apartment. The money felt unreal in her hands, a sacred artifact from another dimension. It was more than her rent. It was groceries, a new coat for Lily, a reprieve from the crushing weight of her desperation. Tears, hot and cathartic, streamed down her pale cheeks. It was a miracle, a pure, unbelievable miracle. Julian Vance sat in the back of his sleek black car a block away, watching the light in her window. His driver, a discreet man named Arthur who had been with him for 20 years, sat silently in the front seat. On the tablet in Julian's lap was a complete but respectfully compiled file on Elena Garcia. He knew she was a widow, her husband lost in a tragic construction accident 3 years prior. He knew she had been unjustly fired from her previous job as a receptionist after refusing the unwanted advances of her boss. He knew she had no family to turn to, no safety net to catch her. He saw life of one undeserved blow after another, and a woman who met each one with a quiet, unwavering resolve. His anonymous gift was not charity. It was a test. He wanted to see what she would do. Would she squander it? Would it change her? He watched and waited, his grief-stricken heart now beating with a new unfamiliar rhythm of intrigue and profound respect. He had to know more. A few days later, a large unmarked box appeared outside her door. Inside, nestled in the tissue paper, was a beautiful, warm winter coat for Lily, the exact shade of blue as her eyes. There was a new pair of sturdy, waterproof boots, a soft woolen scarf, and a small wooden rattle, intricately carved. A toy so simple and timeless, it felt like an heirloom. For Elena there was a thick, warm blanket, a collection of classic novels, and a month's supply of high-quality groceries, including fresh fruit and vegetables, things that had become unimaginable luxuries. There was no note, only the items themselves, a silent testament to an unseen guardian. Helena held the soft blanket to her face, its warmth a stark contrast to the biting cold of her life, and she wept again, not with despair, but with a raw, overwhelming sense of being seen. Someone, somewhere, knew she was there. Someone cared. Lily, meanwhile, squealed with delight, hugging her new coat, her innocent joy a golden glow that filled their small, once bleak apartment. Hope, a fragile, tender seedling, began to push its way through the cracked and barren soil of Elena's heart. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she had long forgotten. She was not alone. Julian's secret interventions became a quiet obsession, a new purpose that began to mend the shattered pieces of his own soul. He arranged for her overdue medical bills to be paid off by a clerical error at the hospital. He had his foundation make an anonymous donation to the underfunded after-school program Lily attended, ensuring it stayed open. Each act was a carefully placed stone, building a bridge of safety and security around her from the shadows. He was healing himself by healing her, finding a strange, cathartic release in being the source of her relief. He learned her routines, the park she took Lily to on the rare sunny afternoon, the small bakery, where she would sometimes stop to stare at the pastries in the window. He began to feel a deep, protective tenderness for this woman he had never spoken to, this virtuous sufferer whose resilience was a quiet rebuke to his own cynical despair. He knew he could not remain a ghost forever. The need to connect, to see her smile and know he was the cause, grew stronger each day. He had to find a way to step out of the shadows and into her world, not as a powerful billionaire, but as a man, just a man. He formulated a plan. The park was an oasis of golden autumn light, the air crisp and clean. Children's laughter echoed like wind chimes, a sound that was both beautiful and painful to Julian. He sat on a worn wooden bench, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, a book lying unread in his lap. He looked like any other person seeking a moment of peace, a carefully constructed illusion of normalcy. He had been waiting for nearly an hour, his heart a strange mix of nervous and calm, when he saw them. Elena was pushing Lily on a swing, a genuine, unburdened smile gracing her lips. The hollow, haunted look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a soft, gentle light. She looked rested, healthier. The sight sent a wave of quiet satisfaction through him, a warmth that reached the cold, lonely corners of his heart. Lily's laughter was a pure, sweet melody, and Elena's face was turned up towards the sun, a picture of simple, profound contentment. He watched for a long time, content to be an observer. This was enough. Then, the chain on the swing broke with a sudden, sharp snap. Lily tumbled to the soft wood chips below with a startled cry, more surprised than hurt. But Elena gasped, her face instantly pale with panic, and rushed to her daughter's side. Julian was on his feet in a second, his carefully maintained composure vanishing. He crossed the distance in a few long strides, his mind flashing back to another park, another fall, another child's cry that had ended not in laughter, but in a shattering, unbearable silence. He reached them just as Elena was helping a tearful Lily to her feet. "Is she all right?" he asked, his voice deeper and more concerned than he intended. Elena looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. She saw a man with kind, steady eyes, his face etched with a sincere worry that was instantly disarming. There was a sadness in his gaze, a raw, unspoken pain that she recognized, for it was a mirror to her own. "I think so," she said, her voice a little shaky as she brushed the wood chips from Lily's new coat. She just got a fright. He knelt down, bringing himself to Lily's eye level. "That was quite a tumble," he said, his voice gentle. "You're very brave." Lily, seeing the kindness in his face, stopped crying and gave him a small wobbly smile. He smiled back, a genuine, unpracticed expression that softened the hard lines of his face. He noticed the small carved wooden rattle she was clutching in her other hand. His heart thudded in his chest. It was the one he had sent, the one he had chosen himself from a small artisan toy shop, remembering how his own daughter had loved the feel of polished wood. A lump formed in his throat. "That's a beautiful rattle," he managed to say, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. Elena looked at him, a flicker of recognition, of connection, passing between them. "It was a gift," she said softly, "from a stranger, an angel, I think." Julian's unwavering gaze met hers, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. He wasn't a stranger, not really. He was part of her story now. He was real. They sat on the bench together while Lily, her scare forgotten, ran off to play on the slides. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a soft hush descended. a comfortable silence between two people who understood loss without needing to speak of it. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet. "I had a daughter," he said, the words feeling heavy and rusty from disuse. "Her name was Maya. She would have been 7 this year." Zerf. The confession scene had begun, not in a dimly lit room, but here, in the golden glow of a fading afternoon. Elena turned to him, her eyes full of a profound, sincere empathy that was more comforting than any words could be. She didn't offer empty platitudes or platitudes. She just listened, her presence a steady, quiet anchor. He told her about the accident, the swift, cruel way his world had been shattered, leaving behind a sterile silence and a cavernous mansion that felt more like a mausoleum. He spoke of the profound loneliness, the feeling of being a ghost in his own life. When he finished, his voice cracking on the last word, there were tears shimmering in his eyes. Elena reached out, not with pity, but with shared humanity, and placed a gentle hand on his arm. The simple touch was electric, a jolt of warmth and connection that he hadn't felt in years. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with her own memories of grief. "My husband, Marco. It's been 3 years, but some days the silence is still so loud." She shared her own story then, the suddenness of his death, the struggle of becoming a single parent overnight, the quiet, desperate battle to keep hope alive for her daughter. They were 2 shipwrecked souls who had found each other on a deserted shore, their shared grief a fragile, sacred bond between them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, they were no longer a hidden savior and a virtuous sufferer. They were Julian and Elena, 2 people finding a flicker of light in each other's darkness. He didn't know how he would ever untangle the truth of his identity from this simple, pure connection he had forged. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He was beginning to heal. The tentative piece they had found was a fragile thing, a delicate glass sculpture in a world of stone. The bond forged in the park was real, a tender shoot of hope, but the harsh realities of Elena's life had not vanished. They had merely been held at bay by Julian's anonymous protection. He had not yet revealed the full truth of who he was, content for a few precious weeks to be just Julian, a kind friend she met for coffee while Lily was at school, a steady presence who listened with an unwavering intensity that made her feel truly seen. For Elena, these meetings were a lifeline, a return to a world of adult conversation and shared laughter. The constant grinding fear that had been her shadow for so long had receded, replaced by a quiet, blossoming trust in this gentle, sad-eyed man. She didn't know his last name, where he worked, or why he had so much free time, and she found she didn't care. She only knew that when she was with him, the world felt less cold, less menacing. But the shadows that had stalked her once before were patient, and their malice had festered. The climax arrived on a Friday, a day that had begun with promise. Elena had just finished her cleaning shift, her mind on the weekend she planned to spend with Lily, perhaps another trip to the park to meet Julian. She stepped out of the gleaming, impersonal office building into the chilly evening air, pulling her thin coat tighter around herself. That's when she saw them. The 3 thugs from the alley were leaning against the wall of the building next door, their postures radiating a lazy, confident menace. Her blood ran cold. The leader, the one with the cruel, glinting eyes, pushed himself off the wall and smirked a slow, ugly expression. "Well, look what we have here," he drawled, his voice carrying across the now crowded sidewalk. People on their way home from work, wrapped in their own worlds, barely glanced their way. He and his friends began to circle her, their movements slow and predatory, designed to intimidate. "Heard you came into some money, little mouse, holding out on us?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was different from the alley. This was public. The shame was a hot, searing wave that washed over her. People were starting to notice now, their steps slowing, their faces a mixture of curiosity and detached pity. No one moved to help. They were just spectators at a drama they wanted no part in. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a trembling whisper. All her newfound confidence stripped away in an instant. She was back to being the victim, small and powerless. The leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Don't lie to us," he sneered, stepping closer until he was invading her personal space, his foul breath washing over her. "We see your kid with her fancy new coat. We see you looking all happy. You owe us." He reached out and shoved her hard. Elena stumbled backward, her bag slipping from her shoulder and its contents, a half-eaten apple, her wallet with the few dollars she had, a book Julian had lent her, spilling onto the dirty pavement. The humiliation was absolute. She was on display, her poverty and her fear laid bare for the world to see. A sob caught in her throat. She felt shattered. Just as the thug bent down to grab her wallet, a sound cut through the street noise, a sound so out of place it made everyone freeze. It was the soft, powerful purr of a high-end engine, followed by the quiet click of a car door opening. A sleek, gleaming black car, the kind that seemed to absorb the light around it, had pulled up to the curb as silently as a panther. The crowd murmured, their attention shifting from the scene of humiliation to this new, commanding presence. The back door opened, and Julian Vance stepped out. But this was not the Julian from the park, dressed in his gentle disguise of sweaters and jeans. This was Julian Vance, the titan of industry, the hidden king. He wore an impeccable, custom-tailored suit of the deepest charcoal gray, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He moved with an aura of calm, absolute power that seemed to warp the very air around him. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury, his steady eyes fixed on the scene with an intensity that was terrifying. He was no longer a friend, he was an avenger. Total silence. He didn't rush. He walked calmly, deliberately, his expensive shoes making no sound on the pavement. The crowd parted for him as if by instinct. The three thugs who had seemed so large and menacing moments before now looked small, slovenly, and utterly out of their depth. The leader straightened up, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" he blustered, trying to reclaim his dominance. Julian stopped a few feet away, his gaze not on the thug, but on Elena, who was still on the ground, her face pale with shock and disbelief. His expression softened for a fraction of a second, a silent promise of salvation. Then he turned his unwavering gaze back to the thug. "I am the man who owns this building," he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried with the authority of a judge passing sentence. "I own the building across the street. In fact," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, "I own most of this block." He gestured dismissively at the thug. "And you are trespassing." The salvation scene was in full motion, a stunning reversal of power. The leader's jaw went slack. The other two thugs began to back away, their eyes wide with fear. Julian's security detail, two large men in discreet dark suits, emerged from the front of the car and flanked him, their presence a silent, overwhelming threat. Julian took another step forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "But more importantly than any of that," he said, his eyes now blazing with a righteous fire, "you laid your hands on her." He looked from the thugs to the silent, gaping crowd. "All of you," he said, his voice rising, filled with a profound, commanding disappointment. "You stood here, and you watched. You saw cruelty, and you did nothing. You saw a good, decent woman being terrorized, and you chose to look away." He shook his head slowly, a gesture of deep contempt. "You are all cowards." He then turned his full attention back to Elena. He walked over to her, knelt down, and began to gently pick up the scattered contents of her bag, his large, powerful hands moving with a tender grace. He handed her the book he had lent her, their fingers brushing. a spark of connection in the midst of the chaos. "Elena," he said, his voice now impossibly gentle, a soft balm on her raw, frayed nerves. "It's over. You are safe now." He stood up and offered her his hand. Trembling, she took it. He pulled her to her feet with an effortless strength, his grip warm and steady, an anchor in the dizzying swirl of her emotions. She looked at him, at this man she thought she knew, and saw a stranger, a powerful, commanding figure from another world. Disbelief warred with a dawning, incredible hope. He turned to the lead thug, who was now pale and trembling. "You will never come near her or her daughter again," Julian stated, not as a threat, but as a simple, undeniable fact. "My people will handle this." His security guards moved forward, and the thugs seemed to shrink, all their malice and bravado gone, replaced by pure, pathetic fear. The power dynamic had not just been reversed, it had been utterly annihilated. Julian had not just saved her, he had publicly vindicated her, wrapping her in his power and protection for all to see. He had revealed himself. The rescue was complete. With the thugs being quietly and efficiently dealt with by his security, Julian led a stunned Elena to the waiting car. He opened the door for her with a courtly grace, a gesture so at odds with the violent chaos of the preceding moments that it felt surreal. The interior of the car was a world away from the gritty street. It was a sanctuary of soft leather, polished wood, and sterile silence. As the heavy door thudded shut, it sealed out the noise of the city, the gaping stares of the crowd, and the ugliness of the world, creating an intimate, protected space for just the two of them. Elena sank into the plush seat, her body still trembling from the adrenaline and the shock. She looked at Julian, who sat across from her, his commanding presence filling the small space. The questions swirled in her mind, a chaotic torrent of confusion and awe. "Julian, who are you?" she finally whispered, the words feeling inadequate to capture the seismic shift that had just occurred in her reality. He met her gaze, his eyes no longer cold with fury, but filled with a deep, raw vulnerability that mirrored the look he'd had in the park. The king had removed his crown, showing her the man beneath. "My name is Julian Vance," he said softly. "And I owe you an apology, Elena. I should have told you everything from the beginning." He began to explain, his voice a low, steady rhythm that slowly calmed her pounding heart. He told her about that first night, how he had been walking aimlessly, a ghost, haunted by his own grief, and how he had witnessed her incredible act of courage in the alley. He described how her selfless, unwavering love for Lily had been a light in his profound darkness, how it had reawakened something in him he thought was long dead. "You saved me that night, Elena, long before I ever did anything for you," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that there was still purity and goodness in the world. You gave me a purpose again." He explained the anonymous gifts, the paid bills, the new coat, each a small act of atonement for his own past helplessness and a testament to his growing admiration for her. He had wanted to protect her, to ease her burdens, but he had been afraid that the truth of his wealth and power would frighten her away, tainting the simple, honest connection they had begun to build. As she listened, Elena's disbelief slowly melted away, replaced by a profound understanding. The $1,000, the warm blanket, the rattle, it all clicked into place. It wasn't a random miracle or an anonymous angel. It was him. It was Julian, the kind, sad-eyed man from the park. The two figures, the gentle friend and the powerful savior, merged into one complex, hurting, and incredibly decent man. Tears welled in her eyes, not of fear or confusion, but of a deep, cathartic gratitude. He hadn't seen her as a charity case to be pitied. He had seen her as a hero to be honored. He had respected her strength even as he sought to shelter her from the storms. "You don't have to apologize," she said, her voice steady now. You saw me. When no one else did, you saw me. The simple words held the weight of years of feeling invisible, of struggling in a world that didn't care. To be seen, truly and completely, was the greatest gift he could have ever given her. He reached across the space between them and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I want to offer you more than just safety from thugs, Elena," he said, his gaze unwavering and sincere. "I want to give you and Lily the life you deserve, a new home away from that place. A new job if you want one, something that uses your intelligence and your heart, or no job at all, the freedom to simply be." He paused, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "I've been setting up a new charitable foundation to help single mothers who are struggling, women just like you who have been failed by the system. I can't think of anyone better to run it, to turn your own experience into a force for good." The offer was staggering, a complete rewriting of her future. It wasn't just a handout, it was an opportunity, a sign of his deep and abiding respect for her character and capabilities. It was a chance to build a new life, not just for herself, but for others. He was offering her not just security, but a purpose that resonated with her very soul. "And for myself," he continued, his voice dropping to an almost whisper filled with a tender, hopeful vulnerability, "I'm asking for something as well. I'm asking you to let me be a part of your lives. Not as a savior or a benefactor, but as a friend, as more, if you'll let me. You and Lily have brought a warmth back into my life that I thought was gone forever. You've made me feel whole again." This was his true confession, more profound than the revelation of his wealth. It was a declaration of emotional need, of a heart that had been healed, and was now offering itself tentatively, hopefully. It was a romantic fulfillment born not of whirlwind passion, but of shared grief, mutual respect, and a deep, quiet understanding. Elena looked at this incredible man who had come into her life like a force of nature, and she saw her future. She saw safety. She saw hope. She saw a partner who understood her past and wanted to build a future with her. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face, a smile that reached her eyes and illuminated her entire being. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Julian, yes." In the quiet, luxurious sanctuary of the car, two broken hearts, finally, completely, found their way home to each other. 1 year later. The morning sun, a cascade of pure gold, streamed through the large bay window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, joyful sprites. The room was filled with a soft, ambient warmth that had nothing to do with the state-of-the-art heating system and everything to do with the palpable sense of peace that resided within its walls. The scent of fresh coffee and pancakes hung in the air, a comforting, domestic perfume. In the center of the spacious, sun-drenched kitchen, Lily, now a vibrant and confident 7-year-old, sat at a large oak table, happily chattering about her school project to Julian, who listened with an adoring, focused attention, his face completely transformed from the haunted mask it had once been. The lines of grief had been softened by laughter, the hollow look in his eyes replaced by a steady, loving light. He was no longer a king in exile, but a man at home, finally and completely. Elena stood at the stove, flipping a pancake, a soft, contented smile on her face. She wore a simple, comfortable sweater, but it was a world away from the threadbare clothes of her past. The change in her was more than just material. It was in the easy way she carried herself, the absence of fear in her eyes, the quiet confidence that radiated from her. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. She was the director of the Vance Foundation for Families, an organization that had, in 1 short year, helped hundreds of single mothers get back on their feet, providing housing, job training, and child care. She had taken the pain of her past and transformed it into a powerful engine for change. Her empathy and quiet strength making her a uniquely effective and beloved leader. She caught Julian's eye across the room, and they shared a look, a silent conversation full of love, history, and a shared, deep-seated gratitude. This was their life now, a beautiful, idyllic reality, born from a moment of darkness on a desperate street. Later that day they walked together through the gardens of their stately but warm home. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air, chasing a flurry of red and gold leaves. It was a perfect day, the kind of day Elena had once only dreamed of. Julian slipped his hand into hers, their fingers intertwining with a familiar, easy comfort. "Do you remember that first day in the park?" he asked softly, his voice full of wonder. "I was so afraid to talk to you. I felt like a fraud." Elena squeezed his hand. "I remember," she said, her voice equally soft. "I remember seeing the sadness in your eyes. I felt like I already knew you." They had healed each other. His resources had given her security, but her spirit had given him back his soul. Theirs was a love story built on the sturdiest of foundations. Mutual rescue. He had saved her from poverty and fear, and she had saved him from the sterile prison of his grief. Lily ran back to them, her face bright with joy, and threw her arms around both their legs, creating a small, perfect circle of family. Julian reached down and effortlessly lifted her into his arms, and the three of them stood there for a long moment, bathed in the golden glow of the afternoon sun, a complete and perfect picture of a happily ever after that had been truly, deeply earned. This story is a testament to the quiet power of a mother's love and the profound truth that sometimes our greatest acts of kindness are performed when we feel we have the least to give. It reminds us that behind every face there is a story of struggle or grief, and that a single selfless act can ripple outward, changing not just one life, but two, creating a wave of healing that mends the most shattered of hearts. Elena's unwavering courage, born from pure love, was a beacon that guided a lost and grieving soul back to the light, proving that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the capacity to love and be loved in return. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the goodness of people, please let us know. These tales are meant to be a light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the most desperate of times, a miracle might be waiting just around the corner, often in the form of a stranger who sees the hero within us. For more soul-stirring stories of love, redemption, and the incredible strength of the human spirit, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales. Your support helps us continue to bring these inspiring narratives to the world. We'll see you in the next one.